Welcome to the Backseat Leadership Podcast, a leadership conversation for those not in the driver's seat of their organizations. Each episode is designed to help backseat leaders answer questions, press into tensions, and flourish in the seat they find themselves right now. And now, here are the hosts of the Backseat Leadership Podcast, Jeff Kokenauer and Brad Merchant.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Backseat Leadership Podcast. This is episode 2. Episode 2. You didn't want to chime in, Brad?
It's episode 2.
It's episode 2. Apparently we're not allowed to talk about Tua, also known as a certain quarterback. Anyway, for a certain football team. Actually, not anymore. Anyway, moving on. This is a conversation for people who find themselves in the back seat, not in the driver's seat, and leadership of their organizations. And really, what we're trying to do is have a conversation that centers around those topics, those questions, those issues that face what we call backseat leaders, people who aren't in the driver's seat of their organizations, their churches, wherever it may be. And our aim is to help our team, our community, if you will, just have a conversation about that. We're not experts. We're actually journeymen, really kind of going through the whole thing together and talking about what we've learned and the things that we're learning right now. And it's been a great conversation at this point, and we're really excited to continue the conversation today.
Absolutely.
And as we do that, as we start episode 2, if you haven't heard more of the expansive reasons why we do what we do, why we do this podcast and have this conversation, you can check out episode 0, and you can find that at thebackseatleader.com, backseatleader.com. Also, you can find it where podcasts find you all the time, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever it may be. Is there a Google Podcast? We're just going to say there is. It's less than, the superior thing of Apple Podcasts.
Right, like if you use an Android,
we're sorry.
There's something wrong with you.
And now that we've played our cards, check out episode 0, smash that subscribe button, and let us know how we can better answer some of the questions. You can do that on the website, backseatleader.com, or you can connect with us on all the socials, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, at Backseat Leader, and we will follow you back. Except on Facebook where you can't, but you know what I'm saying.
Yep.
Enough about all that. Today's conversation is all about leading by following, and this is a critical conversation for a backseat leader because so many times while we are in leadership positions and we are leading people, one of the more critical things is to follow well. And so, Brad, take us into this conversation. Help us understand maybe a couple critical things, maybe core principles. There's a whole bunch of stuff out there that comes from top lead driver seat leaders to talk about what it means to follow well from people who have followed maybe years or decades ago. It's good stuff, but what are some things that we really need to think about as backseat leaders when it comes to leading by following?
I love this topic because no matter where you find yourself on any org chart, it's applicable to you. No matter where you find yourself. Because at the end of the day, every human being throughout the history of time has had to follow.
That's right.
Everyone. From out of the womb up until where you're at today, all of us follow somebody. The question is, we're going to touch on this, how can I use the influence God has given me? I'm not talking about the title. I'm talking about the influence that God has given me to lead even though I'm following. Okay, so we're going to talk about that. And there's 2 guiding principles I really want to touch on. I really want our conversation to center around these 2 guiding principles. I think they've been helpful to me personally, and I think they'll be helpful to those that are listening that want to lead no matter where they're at on the org chart. And the first principle is this: your today matters to God. Your today matters to God. Jeff, we tend to live into the lie that today is just a means to tomorrow. Today's just a means to tomorrow. Hebrews 6, verse 10, one of my favorite verses in the Bible, because I think it's so applicable to leadership and for those of us who are in the back seat. This really is encouraging. It says this: "For God is not unjust so as to overlook your work and the love that you have shown for his name in serving the saints." I love that because you know what that means? That all of the things that we do behind the scenes that no one else sees, the omnipotent, omniscient God of the universe does with full clarity.
It's great.
Now, that's
Awesome.
amazing, because for those of us that are serving in our churches, in our organizations, and we actually get paid to do things behind the curtain,
Right.
things that no one else sees, often no one else appreciates. I'm talking about taking out the trash, working in a cubicle, doing a ton of different things that you and I even have to do in our roles of leadership.
Right.
That no one else sees. God sees them, which means they all matter to him.
That's right.
I love that. God says that today isn't a means, today is an altar. Now, that's a nuance for a lot of us that, as we've talked about in previous episodes, we often view our current position of leadership as a stepping stone, right? That I'm in the back seat, and for some of us who are like us, Jeff, who want to be in the front seat, who have these godly ambitions within us, what we can tend to do is tend to view what I'm doing today as just another ring on the ladder to get to tomorrow, to get to that front seat. But what God actually says is, and this is where the nuance comes in for me, that today isn't a means, today is an altar. That today is an opportunity to worship the creator of the universe, and that everything I do today, he sees, he values. It has meaning to him. Yeah. It's not meaningless, it's meaningful. It's an opportunity to worship him by loving and serving others. I like to think about this for me and Clarissa, my wife, that every time we do something for someone, it's not just a service, though it is. We're serving this person. A couple weeks ago, I served in the nursery at our church. And I tell you what, I have a whole lot more respect for nursery workers. In fact, someone in the nursery was saying, "I can't believe that you prepare sermons." I said, "Actually, I can't believe you have to change diapers."
That's right.
See, because everything we do is actually an act of worship, and when we think about that, it actually brings new purpose and meaning to even the most smallest, minute details of our day.
Yeah.
Something I think about often is that what I'm doing today will matter forever. Because if God sees it, he's going to hold me accountable for it. That means it has meaning forever, even if no one appreciates it here.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Jeff, how do you think about that?
Well, I think you offer a whole lot of stuff, and I love just sitting and listening to you. I mean, you kind of expound on what the Lord has already said about our role, and I think it's really easy to see today as a stepping stone to tomorrow, because we live in a culture that suggests that where you are right now clearly can't be near as good as where you could be.
That's right.
No, I mean, how many times have we had a conversation with leaders who the grass doesn't look very green with where they're at, and so they start looking for where the grass could be greener. The trick with that idea, and the trick with not centering on today, is that you have no idea what the grass is going to look like tomorrow. You have no idea what the grass is going to look like in 10 years. Alan Fadling wrote a book called The Unhurried Life, and he describes Jesus' life. You can describe Jesus in a whole bunch of words, but one word that you cannot move away from in any capacity is Jesus was never hurried. He constantly walked through his day realizing that the things were happening in that moment were critical for that moment. And I remember reading a part of this book. I was in a bit of a, we're going to talk about slumps in the actually the next episode.
Yeah.
I was in maybe a little bit of a slump, kind of. We'll define that more the next episode. And I read this part in here, and Alan says something I'm going to butcher the quote, but he says something to the effect of, we look to where the grass is greener and where the grass looks greener and where the grass looks greener, not realizing that if we would just water the grass where we're at, the grass would become greener. Yeah. We live in northern Indiana. The grass isn't green right now.
It's pretty brown.
This is the release of this episode is the middle of February, and it's still not green. And so we deal with certain seasons where it's just not green. The reality is that when we look to tomorrow and we picture that tomorrow is better than today, we don't capitalize on today. And here's what I think is critical. And I love how you lay this out, that what you're doing today can matter forever, like changing diapers, is because that takes an amount of trust.
Yeah.
There's an amount of trust, whether you're in a church leadership position, you're in a marketplace leadership position, that today is going to matter more if you capitalize on today, that tomorrow is going to take care of itself. There's a level of trust there that isn't seen if you don't apply it.
Yeah.
Like you have to consciously make the decision to trust that you are where you're supposed to be, and that where you want to be may or may not be where you're going to end up.
Yeah, that's right.
Because who knows what tomorrow is going to look like. And I just think it's just a great way to put it. And I think you're right. I think it's easy to say, I'm going to look for the next opportunity to take the next stepping stone. As a youth pastor, we always get accused that when are you going to get a real job? When are you going to be a real pastor? When are you going to be in real leadership? Because it's often been seen as a stepping stone.
Yep.
But the reality is that that's almost every career. You talk about some statistics today and some conversation about today, like the people who are the people who are graduating from college now will have like 17 to 25 different jobs and careers in their adult life. Your grandparents and my grandparents had 2 at maximum, oftentimes. Yep. And so there's this culture that we live in that says, go to the next good thing, go to the next good thing, go to the next good thing, and find it, instead of sit where you're at and make it good. And I think that's really critical.
For sure. And think about this, Jeff. If you're asking the question, okay, I thought we were talking about leading by following. How does the principle, my today, really matters? What's the connection? Here's the connection. When you meet someone who's really content, who's just I'm not complaining. Mm-hmm. Oh, what I'm doing, it's small, but man, it matters to a really big God.
Yeah.
And I'm a really happy Christian.
Yeah.
Because I get to do this. And it's not a means, it's an altar.
Yeah.
When you meet people like that, guess what happens? They attract more influence.
Oh, sure.
We want to be around these people. We want these people on our team. We want to hear what they have to think.
We want that peace.
Totally.
Yeah.
But think about the other side of the coin that we often all fall into, because Jeff, you and I, out of all people, know this to be true. No one had to teach us how to complain.
That's good.
And that's the end of the show.
Have a great week, guys.
No one had to teach us how to complain. In fact, all of us were born with a PhD in complaining.
That's right.
We all know how to do it.
That's
And
good.
we can complain about anything.
Yeah.
Give us the Garden of Eden. Give us perfection.
That's right.
Isn't that the height of pride? That even in the midst of paradise, Adam and Eve found something to complain about.
Right.
Well, you're not giving us that.
Right.
Right.
We want that one.
And we tend to do that all the time.
That's
and
right.
when you're a complainer, you will not attract influence, but what you'll attract is more complainers.
That's exactly right.
They all travel in herds, in packs.
That's right.
And man, when you get enough of those in your organization, it just tears the heart out from the inside. But when you have people that really believe my today matters to God, and they're living with this joyful contentment and that the little matters to a big God, guess what? Those are the people who, though they're not looking at their position as a stepping stone, those are actually the people I find that get promoted, that get new titles, more influence, because they're not chasing after it, right?
Well, and I think critical to the conversation here, what you're talking about, is that you live in that complaining situation, you live in that conversation. That's who you begin to lead.
That's right.
And when that becomes the definition of your leadership, then it becomes infinitely more difficult to follow well, because a horde of murmurs, a horde of them will only breed more murmuring.
That's right.
And so, like, if your leadership becomes defined by complaining, you will lead complainers, and you will struggle to follow those who might be. I mean, come on, leaders make mistakes.
Yep.
In order to follow well, you've got to be able to have an amount of grace for those mistakes. And so when you're in a band of murmurers, that can be the case.
Yeah.
Now this plays into kind of your today mattering to God and mattering to now plays into further leadership, right?
Yep.
Because today, Lord willing, will lead to tomorrow, and then tomorrow,
right.
Lord willing, will lead to another day if He tarries. And so, like, we've got to start thinking about what tomorrow looks like out of our today.
That's right.
Talk to us a little bit about this idea of how you follow now will determine how you lead later.
Yeah, that's the second principle. The first being your today matters to God. The second is this: how you follow now will determine how you lead later. Now, that's a really important principle.
Sure.
That if you're in the back seat, you have to remember this. Like if you put your ear up to a really good backseat leader's life, what you're going to hear is the heartbeat of how I follow now is determining how I lead later. So I'm being very careful about what my life looks like right now. You know, the Bible gives us this principle that you reap what you sow. And that's pretty common to many people who have been Christian for any amount of time, who know their Bibles for any amount. They know that, I reap what I sow. But what does that actually mean, and how does that apply to leadership? Here's how I like to think about it. This means that the attitudes, actions, and affections I have today in my current leadership role will be multiplied in my next.
Wow.
Okay? My current attitudes, actions, and affections, how I am perceived by people, how you experience me, the things that I do, my actions, the things that I love, my affections, that I have today in my current leadership role will be multiplied in my next. You say,
That's
okay, well, what does that mean? Well, here's what it means. If you're listening to this and you're a grumbling, easily offended, lazy leader today, a new title can't erase who you are.
Nope.
It can't. No. Now, we know people, Jeff, that have been grumbling, easily offended, proud, arrogant, entitled, insecure, lazy leaders.
And they're sitting at this table right here.
They're sitting at this table. That's right. We've known them, and they get a new title, more authority, more influence, bigger platform. Mm-hmm. Guess what happens? Nothing.
Yep.
The same person just gets a new title because a new title can't erase who you are.
That's right.
More authority only makes you more of what you already are.
That's right.
You see. And I think that's an important principle for us who are sitting in the back seat, because what we tend to think is, man, if I got more authority, more influence, more staff, more people who look to me, more power, all of a sudden, I'm going to be a different person. Oh, I would be much more joyful and happy and not complaining.
Because I could fix all these problems that I see the driver's seat making.
Absolutely.
Superman complex, right?
Absolutely.
I can save the world.
But friend, if that is you, you need to know that the only one who can change a human heart is God himself.
Yeah.
New title is not going to free you from the chains of today.
Right.
It's not. What's going to change you is understanding that if I do reap what I sow, I need to check my heart today. Now, how do you do that, right? How do
help us with that? Because, I think what you bring up is a huge tension, and it's not just for church leadership, right?
Yep.
This is a huge tension. Like I think it's critical. You talk about different people who talk about leadership. The idea is not just a church Christian thing.
Yep.
The best leaders in the world recognize the value of the things that we're talking about when it comes to character, and the heartbeat of them and their leadership and their organizations.
That's right.
Come from this. So help us. How do we become better backseat leaders and follow better?
I want to start with a question. Yeah. Okay, a question, because these are helpful. Because what we tend to do in situations like this, especially if you're like me and you love to fix things.
Right.
What you tend to do, you hear this and you think, oh man, yeah, you're right. I've not been a good follower and I need to work on that. And so what you tend to do is to create your own fix-it plan.
That's right.
No, what you need to do is take a step back and actually ask questions. And I don't mean to yourself, but others who know you.
That's right.
Ask hard questions. So here's a question. What if you asked your supervisor this question? What words would you use to describe me?
I'm not sure I'm ready for that.
Yeah, I don't know if I am either. But imagine, Jeff, if we sat down with our supervisors, we both have them, and a lot of people listed, all of us got them.
Yeah.
And we sat down and said, hey, I'm really wanting to grow as a follower. I want to grow as a leader. I want to grow as a person, ultimately. What words would you use to describe me? I am not going to be offended by what you said. Please be truthful. That'd be a gift to me. What would they say? Would they say, you're proud, you're defensive, and you're burdensome? Or would they say, you're humble, you're joyful, and you're wise? What would they say? Because whatever they say, it's probably accurate.
Yeah.
And if your first response to what they say is, oh, they don't see things correctly.
Right.
Chances are they do.
Right.
You just don't like yourself.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's a question I think that all of us would be served well by asking other people to see us. Because here's the thing. once again, we've said this before, that we tend to assume the worst about others, but the best of ourselves.
Yeah.
Friend, we are all easily deceived, aren't we? Sin is blinding. We all have a million blind spots. And what we need is other people who give us the gift of honesty by saying, Jeff, you're really proud because you like the Bears and they stink every year. You need people in your life that do that kind of thing, right? But don't you find that to be true?
I found the Bears being sucky to be true, so.
Amen. Amen.
I love what you're talking about, though, because it's another way to kind of approach this conversation of blind spots.
Yep.
Right? Because I can't see what I can't see, and I don't know what I don't know. And I heard Clay Scroggins, who's written the book How to Lead When You're Not in Charge.
Yep, great book.
Great book. We'll put in the show notes. You can get it on Amazon, I'm sure. He was on the Andy Stanley podcast, leadership podcast, a number of years ago, and he asked the question in a different way. He said, if you were me, what would you do differently? And he tries to ask honestly, like, again, you're saying, be honest with me, it'd be a gift to me. And this is what he asks of people below him, but he also asks this of people around him, is, if you were me, what would you do differently? And you're just asking that question, okay, what are my blind spots? What can I not see? And the reality is that your leadership will become that much more robust if you can say, okay, you know what? I need to evaluate this area of my life because this is clearly a blind spot.
Yep.
I got to work on this.
That's right.
And the more you firm those things up, especially your character, the more you're going to lead better, for one, and you're going to be able to follow better because you're going to be you're not going to be leading a horde of complainers anymore.
That's right.
You're leading a horde of empowered, encouraged, and excited people who are ready to fall into the vision of the person who's sitting in the driver's seat.
Yep.
And we all go further when we go together.
That's right.
We might be able to go faster by ourselves, but we go further when we go together. And I think that's critical that when you as a follower, as a backseat leader, can get on board with who's in the driver's seat, man, that just makes...
Says a lot about you, doesn't it?
It says a lot about your character.
That's right. And once again, the principle here is this: more authority only makes you more of who you are. Okay?
That may not be a good thing.
That's right. More authority is not going to erase bad character. Yeah. It's just not. Jeff, we know this to be true. There are organizations full of leaders that carry baggage they can't get rid of simply because they've bought into the lie that a bigger platform and more freedom would fix them. Yeah. It's not true. That's a fallacy.
Yeah.
Instead, what we need to remember is that who I am today will be who I am tomorrow, regardless of what role I'm in.
Yeah.
So when we're in the back seat today, what we need to be asking is, man, what am I like to the people I work with? How do they experience me? When I walk into a meeting, are people like, oh boy, you better walk on eggshells because he's going to run us over?
Here comes this type 8 on the Enneagram.
That's right.
Yeah.
Or when you walk into the room, are people relieved? Oh, this person's going to help us move the ball forward.
Yeah.
They're going to be helpful.
What if instead of loathing the moment that person comes in the room, people are excited that they're a part of the team?
Don't you have people you work with, Jeff, that's true?
Oh, for sure.
I know I do.
Yeah.
There's some people, when they walk in the room, I'm like, man, I'm just so happy we get to work together. But on the other side of the coin, there's people that walk into the room and I think, oh, Lordy, please give me a lot of grace, right?
Yeah. Well, it takes more effort, right?
It does.
Because, I mean, and I know for me personally, like, I know there's been seasons in my life where I have been that guy.
Yep.
Where my heart was... we're in a struggle bus, man. Like, I'm riding the struggle bus, and I'm in section seat 17, way in the back, and there's no way I'm getting off this bus in a moment, right? Because of things that are going on in my life, and I wasn't handling things well. When I was in that season, people didn't want me on their team.
For sure.
Because if my idea didn't get used, I would do whatever I could do.
You'd let people know it.
I would let people know it.
Yep.
And that's not a great team player. That's not following well, because oftentimes my beef was with the person who was leading, because I was in that complaining spot. I was leading a horde of complainers, which meant I was the chief complainer, and the person who was the angst of our existence was the person in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
And it just ruins your character and your ability to lead and your ability to follow well.
Totally. Well, and on the flip side, how I would respond is, because I was so looking forward to being in the front seat, and I was so sick of being where I was at, and I was sick of people treating me the way they did, feel like I was underappreciated, nothing I did mattered, right? I kept looking forward, and because of that, what I would do is I get called into meetings, be a part of these teams. You know what I do? I wouldn't say anything. I would just clam up. I just say, you know what? I'm sick of being here, and I'm ready to go somewhere where they appreciate me. So what I'm going to do is do a silent protest. I'm not going to say a word. I'm not going to engage when people ask what I think. I say, "Oh, I don't care. I'm down for whatever."
Right.
No, in reality, what was my pride doing? My pride was shutting my mouth, right?
Yeah.
And I think if I would have lived into these two principles, that my today matters to God, even the things that, man, I hate doing, but those matter to God, and I want to be held accountable for those, and to have this thankful spirit that I even get to do what I get to do. My everyday matters to God. And the second principle, that who I am today will be who I am tomorrow. I reap what I sow, right? How I follow today will determine how I lead later. If I would have been living into those two things, I would have leaned into some things a lot harder. I would have let my pride just take a back seat to some things, realize this vision is much bigger than me.
Right.
But a lot of us just don't think that way, do we?
No.
We don't. And Patrick Lencioni, who I just love. I mean, the guy writes a book every 10 minutes.
I know. He's
it seems
phenomenal.
like.
What a great leader.
He really motivates us because he says what makes a great leader is really, there's three components. And I thought these were really helpful. These are pretty common. Most of our listeners probably heard of these. Three components of a great leader. Here they are. First is to be humble. What does that mean? It's not about me. Yep. It's not about me. Let your pride take the back seat.
And can I say just really quick, because this is great, but don't discredit what you've been given. Like what you just said, you clam up in a meeting when you're prideful and you're just sick of it. Being humble recognizes how you're gifted as well.
That's right.
And you bring that to the team.
That's right. That's right. When you shut up, you tend to take away gifts from the table.
That's right.
That actually can contribute to the greater good.
Huge.
Right? So Patrick Lencioni, first component of a great leader, humility. It's not about me. The secondly, being hungry. In other words, wanting to make a positive difference in the world. I want to make a difference. It's not about me. I don't have to be noticed. I want other people to win. Those are the leaders, Lencioni says, that everybody wants on their team. First, to be humble, be hungry, and then third, to be smart. I love this one. What does it mean to be smart? He doesn't mean intellectual IQ, because we certainly don't have that.
Right.
A lot of people do. They're probably listening to this. We do not. What he means by being smart is living in step with God's rules. Wisdom. Wisdom, what is wisdom? It's skill in living. Living skillfully. Don't you love people that do that?
That's awesome, man.
And I think if we can really focus on being really good leaders in the back seat that aren't just dying to get in that front seat, but instead we say, hey, you know what, today I'm going to be humble. I'm going to be hungry, and I'm going to be smart. We'd make a big difference where we're at.
Yeah.
You know?
It's good.
All right, Jeff. So let's turn the tables a little bit.
Okay.
You know, every episode we have a short mini episode within the episode. That's how I like to think about it. This is a commercial break.
Right.
And what we like to do is talk about a lot of different things. What we're reading, some things we're learning, things you wish you could have done differently. We're going to have a lot of those throughout our season here. But what I want to talk about today is something that Jeff Kokenauer is learning. So Jeff, talk to our listeners. What's something that you've been learning recently in leadership?
Yeah, and actually it's specific to this topic right here is how do I lead by following better, and how do I keep my character in check? And honestly, I think it's the value of counseling. Is there's a huge thing, there's a huge stigma against going and getting some help. And the reality is that if you find yourself unable to be humble, to be hungry, and to be smart, it may be because there's some things in your world that are just out of order. Here's the thing. I think counseling gets the stigma that it's for people who are a train wreck, who are off the rails, and everything's falling apart. And it's actually a very small sliver of people. Counseling and getting, honestly, it's just you're paying someone to help you think and help you get things in order. And oftentimes you can get help with some help. And so, I've been on this journey for a while now. And really asking the question of, okay, what does my life need to look like? What does an ordered life look like? And it's just been critical to kind of start to ask those questions with someone who is a professional, knows how the brain works, and can help me think through those things. And so I would just encourage anybody, if you've never stepped into a counseling session, I mean, go for one. Go for two. Just give it a couple, three.
Yep.
Give it a month. And maybe you find yourself out of whack, out of order. It's not so much that you're on edge, but you're just kind of out of order. Go get yourself some help and go ask some questions.
Yep, that's a good word.
That's my one thing.
We all need it, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, man, this has been episode 2. This is episode 2, and it's been a great conversation.
Yes.
I mean, I really value those principles today. So the principles today, you can find them in the show notes. Your today matters to God, and how you follow now will determine how you lead later. And if we can embrace those things, it'll be critical.
Yep.
Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at Backseat Leader. Get on the website, www.backseatleader.com, and smash that subscribe button, and tell people that they can be a better leader by being a better backseat leader right now. And we want to have that conversation. Send us some questions. If you've got questions, comments, conversation pieces you'd like us to talk about, we'd love to talk about them and get this team moving forward in the backseat. And we'll see you next week. Not next week, in 2 weeks for episode 3. I'm excited.
Yep, we'll see you then.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Backseat Leadership Podcast. You can find at Backseat Leader on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or visit our website, www.backseatleader.com, for complete show notes, submit a question, or connect with Brad or Jeff. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and rate and review the podcast, and share it with your friends to help them be better backseat leaders as well. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon on the next episode of the Backseat Leadership Podcast.